Good morning. Clicker, here it is. So I'm going to start this morning with a story. Brian is the Chief Technology Officer for a luxury brand company headquartered in Italy on Lake Como. Now this company is feeling a lot of pressure right now to very quickly develop a high-end digital customer engagement platform. You know, their customers are very wealthy people, and increasingly they expect to get the same kind of experience through their handheld devices, their phones and their iPads, and online as they've been getting in their in-store experience. And some of their customers are starting to deliver on that. So Catherine, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at this company, she wants to hire an outside agency to develop this new platform. Brian wants to keep the project in-house. So the decision about which way to go is going to be made at this morning's executive staff meeting. So we meet Brian and his colleagues in the boardroom at the company. So one wall is all windows looking out on Lake Como. The other walls are lined with glossy fashion posters, and all the company's top executives are sitting around the table. Catherine's the first to speak. She says, "We need to do this fast. Our customers aren't going to wait for us, and the agency that I want to bring in has done this before for other clients. We know they can deliver." So Brian says, you know, that's true. We know they can deliver, but aren't we also likely to get something very similar to what they've done for their other clients who are our competitors? We need our experience to be unique. Now, while Brian's talking, he notices that Philip, the CEO, is kind of scratching his jaw, and that's kind of a sure sign that Philip is feeling skeptical or displeased about something. So Brian says to him, you know, do you disagree? And Philip says, you know, I agree that we need our experience to be unique, but frankly, I just don't know that your team has what it takes to deliver. They've never done anything like this before. Now, Brian knew this was going to come up, and he's ready for it. He says, that's right, we would need to bring in some new talent. He knows that their customers are going to expect a lightning-fast, rock-solid transaction experience, and he knows where to get those skills. He says, we'll build a team of developer geniuses from the online trading world. They'll build us a platform that's rock-solid with absolutely no hiccups that our customers are going to love. Now, he's barely finished speaking before Catherine's breaking in, saying, online trading, what do they know about a luxury retail experience? They probably don't even know a Jimmy Choo from a Valentino. It doesn't matter how bulletproof and rock solid this system is. If it doesn't deliver the kind of luxury, high-touch experience that our customers have come to deliver, it won't matter because they won't use it. So this is one of the core dilemmas of digital business, right? On the one hand, you have a need for incredible, sophisticated, amazing technology. And on the other hand, you have a just as high a need for an experience that that's going to be intuitive and simple and pleasurable. And so I want you to just take a couple of minutes right now and talk to the people around you and talk about what should Philip propose next. If you were in Philip's shoes, what would you propose next to solve this dilemma and bridge this need for both sophisticated technology but a great experience? So just take a couple of minutes to talk with your colleagues next to you. And if you don't know each other yet, introduce yourselves. Michael.
Age-old problem of trying to compete against internal development, but it sounds like Brian doesn't have his team in place just yet. So versus Catherine has a team that's ready to go. So what we suggested Brian should propose is, okay, we'll go with the agency, but let me bring a few people in-house to start to develop that institutional knowledge. We'll manage the project for Catherine. Ultimately, maybe we could start bringing in some people and maybe the next phase be able to do it ourselves.
That is a great solution. Anybody else want to suggest something for Brian?
The way you described the problem, it was kind of an A and B solution, develop in-house or outsource to an agency, but our group decided on C, which was maybe bring in some sort of as a service so that Brian could still own the control over the service they select, interact with the service provider, and then I think it was Catherine gets to own the content and the user interaction so that they both get the best of both worlds and they don't have to bring in some sort of new talent that they don't have on staff already.
Excellent. These are both really, really good solutions. And I'll tell you what Brian actually did, because this is, in fact, a true story. What they did was, rather than having this new team be based in Italy with the rest of IT, they decided to co-locate this new team of high-end developers in London, where the company's marketing creative team resides. So they ended up sitting side by side and together developing this new system. So Brian gives that out as a proposal. He says to Catherine, you know, neither one of us can do this on our own, but together our teams would be unstoppable. And he's pleased to see that she actually likes this idea. And she says, you know, along the way, both of our teams would gain some new skills, and that could really give us something unique. So there's some talk about logistics and costs, and Philip, the CEO, says, you know, have a plan on my desk by the end of the week. So Brian's feeling pretty pumped because this is a big win for him. And he looks over at Catherine, and she smiles back at him, but he notices that her affect is pretty frosty. You know, her arms are crossed over her chest, and he thinks to himself, this is not going to be easy. So we will leave Brian and his colleagues for now, but keep that image in your mind because we'll come back to them later. And we'll get into the presentation. So I've divided this presentation up into 3 acts. And most of what I'm going to be talking about is based on research that I've done with Harvard Business Review Analytics Services, as well as the Center for Information Systems Research at MIT. I have a relationship with them as well. So this is all based on research we've done over the past year and a half. And we're going to talk about the digital threat and the need for responsive IT. We'll talk about the business IT partnership, and we'll end on the CIO as digital leader. So, you know, I kind of hope that this question of is digital a threat to your business has been put to rest by now, but I still encounter people who are somewhat skeptical, so we'll just briefly touch on that. In one of these studies, this was a big survey, 750 respondents, global in nature, you know, all countries, all industries, all size companies, and the respondents were from all different functional areas because this is a HBR audience, as well as with this one we partnered with CIO Magazine. A full 3/4 said that their company's very survival depended on their ability to effectively exploit information technology for business advantage. And the number one factor driving market change right now is changing customer behaviors and expectations. You know, customers, you know, everybody's mobile, everybody expects to be able to transact and access information anywhere, anytime. And customers are really in the driver's seat. We just finished a study, it hasn't even been published yet, where we asked about key differentiators for organizations' business. And the number 2 differentiator, second only to product quality, was creating a compelling customer experience. So this is a really big deal. the flip side, or what makes this really challenging, is that number two driver for market change, was commoditization and a drive for cost saving. So while as consumers, we have access to any product we want all over the world, from the biggest retailers down to the smallest independent seller on eBay, and we can find it for the best possible price. So what this is doing for companies, it's really creating a dilemma. On the one hand, you have to create an experience that's unique and differentiating and amazing, but you can't do that by driving up your costs and price yourself out of the market. So it's really creating a lot of tension, particularly for IT. The good news is that IT actually has the solution, and Dominic talked about it a little bit before when he was talking about simplification, and it includes things like automation and more intelligence, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. In the project that I did with MIT, I really like this example. I did a case study on Emerson, and I like this because a lot of times when you talk about customer experience, people think retail, people think B2B. Emerson, or B2C, Emerson is a big industrial manufacturing company. It's been around for 125 years. It's $25 billion in revenue, give or take. And it doesn't get any more sort of hard good, industrial, tangible than that. And yet, they came to my attention because I was at the Gateway to Innovation conference in St. Louis, where Emerson is headquartered. And I heard their COO speaking, and he said something that really made me sit up and take notice. He said, changing models of customer engagement is one of the top 3 risk factors that they discuss with their board of directors. Now think about that for a minute. This is an industrial manufacturing B2B, solid B2B company. Changing models of customer engagement is one of the top 3 risk factors. And when I interviewed their executives, the way they described it to me was very evocative. They said, Abbie, it's like we're seeing our customers disappear before our eyes. The way business was done in the past, their salespeople had long-term, 30-year relationships with the purchasing agents at their customers' companies. All business was done face-to-face over the phone. It was very personal. Well, younger people coming into those purchasing agent roles, they don't care about those relationships. That's not how they want to start and do business. They start online. Their customer journey is online. They're using Amazon Supply. They're Googling for not Emerson. If you Google Emerson, they were coming right up to the top. But if you Googled one of their product capabilities or sets, they were not showing up very well. So Emerson has invested a lot in figuring this out and developing those capabilities pretty soon. Now, on the flip side, this is Charlie Peters. He's the head of strategy at Emerson. He said, in the 21st century, we will differentiate our company and provide value to our customers and stakeholders through trading on information. Now, for Emerson, that means things like embedding sensors in their products and providing their customers with capabilities to predict what's going to happen in their industrial settings and having that intelligence built in. I'm curious if you would just show of hands, does this statement resonate for your companies? Does this statement make sense from your business? Just raise your hand if you think that this is relevant for your company. Yeah, I think you're going to see that more and more. Maybe not 100%, but increasingly greater percentages for your business going forward. Now, the problem is that all of this is changing and developing so very quickly. Almost half of respondents to this study, and remember, this is the HBR audience, so it's mostly business people. They said their company had missed opportunities because IT was too slow to respond. In this particular study, we hadn't anticipated this concept of sort of IT responsiveness as being so central, but it really came out in a big way. And so we ended up segmenting the data based on 3 categories. So we identified the leaders. Those were the companies where the respondents had said their IT organization was very responsive to new ideas for IT-enabled innovations coming from the business. And then the followers were, sort of middle ground, so they're okay. And then the laggards were the companies that said, no, our IT organization is not at all responsive. And so as we looked at the question, to what extent is the confluence of new technologies changing things in your organization, the differences were dramatic. So customer engagement, the leaders were so much farther ahead in changing their business to adapt to new customer expectations. The ways employees get their work done. The product offerings, the things that the products and services that they sell. The business models, which follow on to that. And even core business processes and operations. So this idea of IT responsiveness is really critical in a time when business is transforming. And so when we got into the second phase of this research, we really wanted to probe into that and say, okay, so what goes into being more responsive? And these are some of the things that came up. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these. We could spend a day on each of them. But the first of all was to simplify the infrastructure. And Dominic talked about that as well. We really need to get that simple base upon which then you can be flexible and move. Automation goes along with that. If there's stuff that you can not have to have people doing in the traditional way, but you can actually just automate it, go for it. Innovation, again, we could spend a whole week on this topic. But innovation, I think the point I want to make around this one is it has to start inside of IT, shifting that mindset to we really want to offload sort of the grunt work of IT so that our teams can focus more on innovation. But it extends beyond that as well. It's how can we engage all of the people in our business to be thinking about this, to be thinking about how are we going to compete in a world that is really IT-enabled. Along with simplifying and automating is expanding use of partners. Is there stuff that you don't need to do so you can focus your teams on other things? And similarly, exploiting cloud and analytics. I interviewed someone from a health insurance company, and their business is changing really dramatically right now. Who their customer is changing because of more individuals coming into the health insurance market, but also digital. And so they've had to change the way, they don't think about, their customer used to be the employers, and more it's the individuals at the end of the insurance policy. And so they've had to shift from thinking about those end customers, sort of being at a distance to being much closer in. And for them, that's meant, one of the things that has meant is shifting from queue-based routing for their interactive voice system to skills-based routing. And that makes sense. It seems like that's the right thing to do, but think about the complexity of what goes into making sure that happens, so that what you're doing for self-service is happening on the web and through your mobile device, through your customer's mobile device. But when somebody picks up a phone to call, it means they want to talk to somebody. And so how do you get that person to the right person, the person that can answer their question on that first call very quickly? And that's complicated. And then finally, collaborate. This has been a huge theme over and over again in every study that we've done this year. The need for greater collaboration between IT and other parts of the business. And so that's what we're going to talk about next. One of the drivers for that is that, this was just sort of a demographic question we asked, but we found it really pretty impressive that 60% of the respondents to this Harvard Business Review survey said that they were directly involved in IT decisions, even though only 27% of them worked in IT. So they said they were either the primary decision maker or part of a decision-making team. And this is setting the context for what needs to happen. 90% is a really big number to get in a survey. 90% said that collaboration is critical to exploiting IT for business advantage. And most organizations haven't really been set up for this. Organizations have been very siloed for a long time, and so making this shift requires changing a lot of things from an organizational perspective, from a behavior perspective, how you communicate, and just from a philosophical and a mindset perspective. So how many of you are having to interact and collaborate more with either your marketing leaders, your engineering teams, or your product development teams? Raise your hand if your collaboration is increasing on that front. Can I ask somebody to just share with us sort of what that is and why that's happening and what that looks like in your company? I'm sorry, I forget who raised their hand. You did, right here.
Yes. Well, collaboration becomes extremely critical within our organization because, IT is capable of executing on what the business is trying to do, but they're not the experts in each one of those different segments that pertain to the company. So we need the feedback, we need the ideas of the different business units within our company to say, this is what we're trying to get. And so if you can at least present where you want to go, I then believe that IT can then figure out how to engineer that, how to digitize it. And so if IT is in a position that they think that they can do both sides, the digitization as well as understanding what the business is trying to do, I think that's a formula for failure. So I think that you have to open the doors and introduce that level of discussion and collaboration.
Great, thank you. And I really like what you said about conversation, because this is not we always sort of learned from the business what they wanted to do and then went off and did it. This is a much more iterative, ongoing, engaged process. So this is Kathy McElligott. She was the CIO at Emerson. She's moved into a different role, but I like the way she described this. She said, the lines have blurred. IT is extending into marketing and engineering, and they are extending into areas traditionally owned by IT. And then she went on to say that, IT has always been pushed to better understand the business, right? But what's different today is that everybody out in the business now has to know more about technology, and that's really, really different. We did a study with Red Hat this year where we looked at this question of what do the lines of business leaders know, what do they need to know, and what do they know, and how do they learn it? And as you can guess from the graphic here, what they need to know, there's a high need for knowledge about different aspects of technology and communications and digitization. But when we asked we asked the respondents to rate the leaders of those functional areas on their skills, there was a great imbalance. So this graphic is showing the knowledge need. The need for digital knowledge, really high in IT, not surprising, but also really high in marketing and PR, customer services, sales, and R&D. And for this study, we segmented out on, we took two different aspects. We looked at companies that had developed a vision and strategy for their digital business, and then secondly, that had put in place the people, processes, and technologies to execute on that strategy. So we identified the leaders as the companies that had both of those, that rated highly in both of those areas. The followers were strong in one, weak in the other, or else just middling scores in both. And then the laggards were weak in both. So this is the need, and that's the measurement of the strengths in those different functional areas for the laggards. There's a huge delta between what's needed and what exists today. The followers, there's still a big gap. And only at the leader companies are the functional leaders delivering on those expectations and have the skills and knowledge that they need. And in this study, so what we were looking at is, so what's IT's role in helping to move that forward? And we'll talk a little bit about that. So this collaboration, we have been gathering some practices along the way, and these are some of the things that have proven to work very well. You remember Brian and his co-locating the developers with the marketing creative people? That's a great practice. Or even having job rotations, having people come into and out of IT or other functional areas. Cross-functional reporting relationships. I talked with the head of e-commerce for one of the big athletic shoe companies, and she had dual solid line reporting to the CIO and CMO. And then that guy, Charlie Peters from Emerson, so the head of strategy, he has only 2 direct reports, the CIO and the CMO. And the head of whichever business unit's going through the greatest transformation at any given time. So we're starting to see these kind of crossing over of lines. One of the, the blended roles, that's an interesting one, and I'm curious to know where this is going to go. I think the Chief Digital Officer is an example of that. Someone that has both that technical understanding and vision, and also understands sort of the business and customers really, really well, and can combine those things. But there aren't that many of those people out there. I think in one of the studies we just did, I think 7% of the companies had a chief digital officer. But it's also one of the most in-demand roles that there is. So Korn Ferry did a study or released a report on which C-level positions were most in demand, and the chief digital officer was number 3. And interestingly, the CIO and the CMO, neither one of them made it into the top 5. So having those individual skills is really important, but having the blended skills is really powerful. And you're not very often going to get that in one person, so this partnership idea is really essential. One of the most common practices that we've seen is this role of business relationship manager. And this is, so it's called different things, but basically this is a position where it's somebody from IT who's sitting out in the lines of business, and they're there to understand what's happening on the ground. What does a business need to do, and how can IT help? And to bring that information back to IT, but also to bring IT to those conversations. And it's also helping in sort of cross-pollinate, and looking to, well, business unit A is trying to accomplish this, solve this problem, but hey, somebody over here has already done that, so let's leverage. So how many of you have something like this in your organization, this business relationship manager role? Let's raise your hand if you do. Well, I would say more of you should think about it. It's a really effective, and I have never talked to anybody who's done it who says that they're sorry they did it or they're not getting great results. And then last, the Business IT Strategy Board. This is something that Emerson did at the very senior level. It was formed by the COO, the CIO, and the head of strategy. It's the company's 25 top leaders. So the heads of the major functional areas and the heads of the biggest lines of business, they get together 4 times a year it's the company's de facto digital strategy governance body. And they keep it, the conversations are at a very high level, very strategic, but they also sort of do deep dives into things like, using a particular software suite for solution selling as they're getting more into this customer journey. And what it's done for them is it's created really great alignment across this huge, very complex business. And it's given them the ability to adjust really quickly when conditions changed. That was not something that they necessarily anticipated. They knew that it was going to be a good thing to do, but this ability to adjust quickly was sort of an added benefit. So that brings us to the third act, which is the CIO as digital leader. And I think there's such an opportunity here, but it's not a given. So we'll talk about that. We asked, who do you believe is best suited to lead digital transformation in your organization? Overwhelming support for the CIO. Your business colleagues want you to take on this role and lead this effort. When we look at just the IT respondents, of course, that shoots way up. But what I'm interested in is when we looked at the general management respondents. Still more votes for the CIO than any other position, but it's starting to level out. As your business colleagues become more knowledgeable in technology, the CEO is gaining confidence. The chief operating officer is gaining confidence. And it's not, there won't be one answer for every organization. In some cases, it will make sense for it to be the CIO. In some cases, it will make sense for it to be the CEO or the COO or the line of business leader. It's going to vary depending on the individuals and the situation of the company. But my takeaway on this, though, is that if this is something you want to do, seize the day. Business leaders want the CIO to step into this role, and if you don't want to spend the rest of your career just managing the back office systems, I would take the opportunity to participate in this conversation. And it starts with building awareness. I mentioned before that with that Red Hat report, the digital IQ and the gap that exists. Well, this is something that it can come from any part of the organization, but that means it can come from IT as well. So I talked with the head of prospect marketing for one of the big credit card companies, and they were, really simple thing, doing lunch and learns, bringing in outside experts, or sometimes somebody from inside the company with expertise, to talk about things like, gamification and how might that apply to our business. These new things as they're evolving, bringing them in and getting everybody kind of thinking about what's possible. Stories are really powerful. And if you can put together a collection of stories about what some of your competitors or partners are doing in these spaces, and tell it from the point of view of your business peers, not from the point of view of IT, but from the business problem and what they're doing, that really helps to sort of get people to think about it in a very concrete way, not an abstract way. Go visit companies. If you know of a company that is doing some interesting things, take some of your colleagues out with you and go see what they're doing. Thomas Cook Travel a few years ago was really feeling under the gun that they were behind in developing some of their digital capabilities, and that it was really hurting the company's performance. The CEO there, Harriet Green, set up a digital advisory board. So this was an outside external board of advisors who told them about the things that were happening out there and how those things might apply for Thomas Cook. And then the last one is a really simple, low-cost, easy thing to do, reverse mentoring. It's just getting the younger people in your company to sit with your executives and to talk to them about what these new things are. You know, what is Instagram? What is, I don't even know what this latest thing is. And to talk about, just to show them how it works, how people are using it, and so that they can start thinking about how might that apply to the business. And the reason it's been so effective for the companies that use it is because it's very non-threatening, and it's, you know, it's like having their kid, if they have teenagers, sit down with them. Is there anybody here doing the reverse mentoring in your organization? Wow, not a single person. Well, I strongly recommend this one as well. There's a lot of different approaches to fostering innovation, and I'm not going to talk about all of them. I'll mention just a few. Norm Felcham, who's the CIO at Qualcomm down in San Diego, a couple of times a year, he takes out his entire senior leadership team to go and visit a bunch of different VCs in Silicon Valley, and they run him through their portfolio of startup companies that they're investing in. And it gives them a couple of things. So one thing is just it lets them see what's happening out there, and so that they know that they're on top of the latest trends, but they also actually invest in some of these companies so that they can get these capabilities in really, really quickly without necessarily developing them themselves. Innovation days are just a way to bring your business partners into IT to see some of the cool things IT is doing, because a big problem with this sort of relationship gap that's existed in the past is just a lack of awareness. So bring people in and get them excited. Like the field trips, simulations and prototypes, you know, there's nothing like getting hands-on. You know, make it tangible. So because things are changing so fast, it's hard to keep up mentally. If you can show versus tell around a new kind of capability, that's a much better way to go. And then just the last two things. Is anybody using hackathons? Yep. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing and how it works? Okay.
So we do hackathons every 6 months, and it's not only engineering, it's anybody from across the organization. And in fact, people like finance and IT typically try to kind of incent teams to work on businesses' processes that they want automated, or they want tools to be developed in-house. And a lot of the systems that have grown with our company have come out of our hackathon projects and become full-fledged parts of our system.
Cool. How diverse are the teams that are doing that? Who's involved?
So it's company-wide. Most of the participants are in engineering or kind of within IT.
Okay, great. And a lot of companies are using this as an opportunity to bring together other functions. I mean, it depends on what the problem is you're trying to solve. But if it's a customer problem, then having more diversity is a really good thing. And then the last one that I have up here, the Shark Tanks, same model as a TV show, but it's the company's executives, or maybe there's a couple of the company's executives, maybe there are a couple of people from outside, trusted advisors, and then people come and pitch their ideas. Not only do they get sort of judged, but they get advice. If there's a kernel of a good idea in there, you know, how can we then nurture that, and what do you need to do to get it to a point where we're going to invest in it? I'm just going to touch on this, but it's a really important point today. You know, if CIOs are going to lead in this digital world, they're not going to lead through absolute authority. You know, it's not, the world has changed. for most aspects of what we're talking about here, you're not going to just rule by fiat. And so leading by influence is a really it's a great way to think about how you're going to get things done. And there are three aspects to leading through influence. The first is credibility. And people talk about table stakes. You know, that's the sort of the foundation. Do our systems run well? Are they reliable? Are they secure? Are they always there for us when we need them? You know, that's just the start of credibility. Credibility includes, you know, your systems can be great and nobody really notices. You have to also promote that. There's a degree of self-promotion that's involved in building credibility. And you can do that with, you know, apply for the CIO 100 award or get written about in the Wall Street Journal's CIO Journal. There's various ways to build your brand as IT. There's also, you know, credibility. That's why a lot of people subscribe to Gartner, right? It's like we're making a decision that's been validated by other people. The reason I have Sherlock up here for relevance is to be relevant, you have to be a good investigator. You know, it takes deduction and observation, and it takes asking really good questions. Communication is hard, and to be able to have that conversation that we were talking about before is a two-way thing. And so really make sure that to be relevant that you're engaging in that way. And then finally, you can't influence anybody if they don't trust you. Building trust is based on relationships. You know, what do you have in common? What kinds of things do you have you delivered for them? Do you deliver what you say you're going to deliver, and are you transparent? Those are the things that go into building trust. So when we left Brian and Catherine, things were not really so great. Where did Brian go wrong? Anybody want to take a crack at what did Brian do wrong that set Catherine off? I know you know the answer. What's that?
Is it that he told her she wasn't capable of doing that on her own?
He told her she wasn't capable. Yeah. What else? Yeah.
Because assembling a brand new team, that's not the highest way of delivering credibility when you don't have that track record.
Assembling a new team without having a track record of having done that before. Yeah. What else?
She didn't partner with Catherine.
Say more.
She didn't partner with Catherine
She didn't part.
to understand her line of business, what she needs to deliver. Seems like she was just focused, siloed, thinking about technology.
Right. Right. And those are all really important points. He should have gone and had a conversation with her ahead of the meeting to talk through this idea and to present it as a joint idea. You know, this should have been a joint idea between Brian and Catherine. So this is what digital requires of IT leaders. First of all, responsive IT, and how you get there is by simplifying, automating, and offloading the stuff that isn't critical, isn't differentiating. And that's about technology, but it's also about your teams, and do you have the right skills? It requires this business IT partnership at the most senior level with those digital IT strategy boards, but all the way down through your organizations. And it requires CIO leadership and being able to shift your own attention and energies to innovation, but also shifting your teams and engaging the rest of the organization in that innovation process. And that's it. Thank you very much.